The morning sun cast long shadows across the Pennsylvania State Police Canine Training Academy as Officer Sarah Martinez walked nervously toward the kennels. At 26, she was the youngest officer ever selected for the Millbrook Police Department's K-9 program, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her uniform, knowing that today would determine whether she had what it took to be a handler or if she'd return to regular patrol duty with her tail between her legs. "You sure you want to do this, Martinez?" Sergeant Williams asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "3 experienced handlers have already passed on this particular dog. Maybe we should start you with something more manageable." Sarah squared her shoulders, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I'm sure, Sergeant. I've wanted to work K-9 since I was 8 years old and saw a demonstration at the county fair. I'm not backing down because of one difficult dog." The truth was more complicated than she let on. Growing up in a small apartment with her single mother, Sarah had never been allowed pets. Her mother worked 3 jobs just to keep them afloat, and there was no money or time for animals. But Sarah had devoured every book about police dogs she could find at the library, watched every documentary, and dreamed of the day she'd have a 4-legged partner of her own. As they approached Kennel 12, the sound of destruction reached their ears first. Heavy thuds, the screech of metal against concrete, and what sounded suspiciously like fabric being torn to shreds. Sergeant Williams winced visibly. "That's Rex," he said, stopping in front of the kennel door. 2-year-old German Shepherd. Came from military training, but was deemed unsuitable for deployment. The official report said he was too aggressive for combat operations. But between you and me, I think he was too smart. Military dogs need to follow orders without question. Rex ... Well, Rex questions everything. Through the chain-link door, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the dog that would change her life forever. Rex was magnificent 90 pounds of pure muscle and intelligence, with the classic black and tan markings of his breed. His coat gleamed despite his current circumstances, and his dark eyes held an intelligence that was almost unsettling. He was in the process of systematically destroying his 3rd training dummy of the week, shaking it with the focused intensity of a predator. "He's been through 3 handlers already," Williams continued. "Officer Peterson lasted 2 days before requesting a transfer back to traffic duty. Side Rex was untrainable and dangerous. Handler Davis made it a week, but gave up after Rex ignored every command during a practice drug search. And don't even ask about what happened with Thompson." Sarah watched Rex for several long minutes, noting the controlled precision in his movements. This wasn't mindless destruction. This was a highly intelligent animal who was bored out of his mind and frustrated with humans who didn't understand him. "What exactly happened with Thompson?" she asked quietly. Williams sighed. "Rex locked onto Thompson's sleeve during a bite training exercise and wouldn't release on command. Held on for 15 minutes before the trainers could get him to let go. Thompson needed 12 stitches. Did Thompson follow proper protocol?" "What do you mean?" Sarah had studied every manual, watched countless training videos. "The release command. Did Thompson use the correct voice tone and body language? Was he calm or panicked?" Williams looked surprised by the question. "Well, Thompson was pretty shaken up. His voice was raised, and he was pulling away. Rex was doing exactly what he was trained to do," Sarah said with sudden clarity. "If Thompson was panicked and pulling away, Rex's instincts would tell him the suspect was still a threat. He wasn't being disobedient, he was being a good police dog." She knelt down in front of the kennel door, ignoring Williams's sharp intake of breath. Rex immediately stopped destroying the training dummy and approached the door, his intense gaze fixed on her face. For a moment, neither moved. "Hey there, big guy," Sarah said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not a bad dog, are you? You're just misunderstood." Rex tilted his head, a gesture so human-like it made Sarah's heart skip. Slowly, she extended her hand toward the chain link, palm up and non-threatening. Rex approached cautiously, his nose working to catalog her scent. "You know what I think?" Sarah continued in the same gentle tone. "I think you're tired of people trying to make you into something you're not. You're not a mindless robot who follows orders without thinking. You're a partner who wants to work with someone, not for someone." Rex's tail gave the slightest wag, the first positive behavior any handler had seen from him. William stepped closer, amazed. "I've never seen him respond like that to anyone." Sarah stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with Rex. "I want to work with him. Not train him, not break him, work with him. He needs a partner who respects his intelligence, not someone who sees him as a tool. Martinez, I have to warn you, if this doesn't work out, there won't be another chance. The department is already questioning whether to continue the K9 program at all after Rex single quotes S. difficulties. If you can't make it work with him, he'll probably be transferred to a private security company, or..." Williams didn't finish the sentence, but Sarah understood. Rex's future and her dreams hung in the balance. "I understand, Sergeant. But I have a feeling Rex and I are going to surprise everyone." As if he understood every word, Rex sat perfectly at attention, his intelligent eyes never leaving Sarah's face. In that moment, both the young officer and the misunderstood dog knew they had found something neither had expected to find: a true partner. The unlikely match had been made. Now came the real work of building a bond that would soon become legendary in Millbrook and beyond. 6 months after their first meeting, Officer Sarah Martinez and Rex had become the most talked-about K9 team in Millbrook, though not always for the reasons Sarah hoped. Their training had been unconventional, filled with moments of breakthrough, followed by spectacular setbacks that had the other officers shaking their heads in bewilderment. The morning of May 15th started like any other Saturday. Sarah was off duty, enjoying a rare quiet breakfast with Rex, sprawled across her kitchen floor, when her radio crackled to life with the urgency that every officer dreaded. "All units, we have a missing child at Millbrook Park. 8-year-old Emma Rodriguez, last seen wearing a pink jacket and blue jeans. Family was having a picnic near the playground when she disappeared approximately 30 minutes ago. All available units respond immediately." Sarah's coffee mug hit the counter with a sharp clink. Rex's head shot up instantly, reading her body. Language like a book he'd memorized. This was their first real emergency call. No training scenarios, no practice runs. A real child was missing, and every minute counted. "Come on, partner," Sarah said, already reaching for her duty belt. "Time to show them what we can do." The drive to Millbrook Park took 8 minutes that felt like hours. Sarah's mind raced through everything she and Rex had learned during their intensive training. Tracking, scent work, search patterns, it had all been theoretical until now. Rex sat perfectly still in the back of the patrol car, but Sarah could feel his energy, building like a coiled spring. The park was chaos when they arrived. 6 patrol cars with flashing lights, firefighters with search equipment, and a growing crowd of concerned citizens formed a makeshift command center near the playground. In the middle of it all stood Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, her face streaked with tears as she clutched a small pink sweater. Chief Morrison spotted Sarah immediately. "Martinez! Thank God, we need Rex on this. The family thinks Emma might have wandered toward the woods, but it's 15 acres of dense forest. We could be searching all night." Sarah felt the weight of every skeptical glance from her fellow officers. Detective Murphy had made no secret of his opinion that Sarah and Rex were too green for serious police work. Officer Collins had openly questioned whether Rex could be trusted in a high-pressure situation after their disastrous demonstration at the county fair, where Rex had refused to perform any commands in front of the crowd. "What's Emma's scent?" "Item?" Sarah asked, forcing her voice to remain steady and professional. Mrs. Rodriguez held out the pink sweater with shaking hands. She was wearing this earlier. She took it off when we started the picnic because she said it was too hot. Sarah knelt beside Rex, letting him thoroughly scent the sweater. His nostrils flared as he processed the information, his intelligent eyes focusing with laser intensity. This was the moment of truth. Would all their training hold up when it really mattered? "Rex, find Emma," Sarah commanded, using their practiced search command. For a terrifying moment, Rex simply stood there, head raised, sampling the air. Sarah's heart sank. Around them, she could hear whispered comments. "Maybe. The dog isn't ready. Should have called the state police K9 unit ... This is too important for rookies ... double quotes. Then Rex moved. Not toward the woods where everyone expected, but in the opposite direction, toward the parking area. His nose was down, following something. Invisible to everyone else. Sarah trusted him completely, even as confused murmurs arose from the other officers. "He's going the wrong way," Detective Murphy called out. "The woods are back there." "Rex knows what he's doing," Sarah replied firmly, following her partner as he led them past parked cars, across a small creek, and up a steep, rocky hillside that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old to navigate. The terrain grew increasingly difficult. Officers on foot were breathing hard, struggling to keep up as Rex navigated fallen logs and steep inclines with sure-footed confidence. Twice, Chief Morrison suggested they turn back and try a different approach. Twice, Sarah politely but firmly insisted they trust Rex. "Martinez, it's been 2 hours," Detective Murphy panted as they climbed over a massive fallen tree. An 8-year-old couldn't have come this far. Sarah was beginning to have her own doubts when Rex's behavior suddenly changed. His pace quickened, his tail began wagging, and he started making small whining sounds of excitement. Through the trees ahead, Sarah spotted a structure she'd never noticed before, an old hunting cabin, probably abandoned for decades. Rex bounded toward the cabin and began barking excitedly at the front door. Sarah approached cautiously, her flashlight cutting through the gathering dusk. "Emma? Emma Rodriguez? Are you in there, sweetheart?" A small, frightened voice answered from inside. "I'm here, but I can't get out. The door is stuck, and there are scary sounds outside." Sarah's radio crackled as she called for backup and paramedics, but her attention was focused on the door. The old wood had swollen in its frame, trapping the child. Inside, it took 3 officers working together to force it open. Emma Rodriguez emerged like a small, dirty angel, throwing herself into her mother's arms when the family arrived minutes later. She was dehydrated and frightened, but completely unharmed. "How did you find her way up here, sweetie?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked through her tears. "I was chasing a butterfly," Emma said matter-of-factly. "It was so pretty, and I followed it into the woods. But then I got lost and scared, so I went into the little house to hide from the monsters. The monsters turned out to be owls and other nocturnal creatures that had terrified the child as darkness fell." As the paramedics checked Emma over and the family prepared to head home, Chief Morrison approached Sarah and Rex. The skepticism that had been in his eyes earlier was completely gone. "Outstanding work, both of you," he said quietly. Rex tracked her scent over impossible terrain for nearly 3 miles. "That's the work of a veteran K9 team." Sarah felt a surge of pride as she scratched Rex's ears. Around them, her fellow officers were looking at the rookie team with new respect. Detective Murphy even nodded approvingly as he passed. "Good boy, Rex," Sarah whispered. "We did it, partner." Rex's tail wagged as he leaned against her leg, both of them exhausted but triumphant. They had proven themselves when it mattered most, saving a child and earning their place as true partners in the Millbrook Police Department. The Millbrook Gazette's headline stretched across the entire front page in bold letters. K-9 team saves the day again. Below it, a color photograph showed Officer Sarah Martinez and Rex standing beside a massive pile of confiscated drugs worth nearly $2.3 million, their 15th major bust in just 2 years. Sarah folded the newspaper and placed it in Rex's growing scrapbook, a thick collection that chronicled their incredible journey from doubted rookies to the department's most celebrated team. Each clipping told a story. Local K-9 finds missing. Alzheimer's patient. Police dog tracks armed robber for 5 miles. Hero dog saves toddler from drowning. "Look at us, Rex," Sarah said, scratching behind his ears as he lay stretched across her living room floor. "We're practically celebrities." Rex's tail thumped against the hardwood floor, but Sarah noticed something that sent a small chill through her heart. The thump was slower than usual, more deliberate. At 4 years old, Rex should have been in his absolute prime, but lately, she'd been noticing subtle changes that worried her. The morning routine that once saw Rex bounding energetically to the patrol car now included a careful stretch and a moment of hesitation before he jumped in. His enthusiastic barking during their pre-shift equipment check had become more measured, more reserved. Most concerning of all, Rex had started favoring his left hip after particularly long tracking sessions. "You're probably just tired, boy," Sarah told herself as much as Rex. "We've been working hard cases all month." The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Chief Morrison's voice carried a mixture of pride and urgency. "Martinez, we need you and Rex at Millbrook Elementary immediately. Principal Henderson called about a possible drug situation. Some parent found what looks like cocaine residue in the playground sandbox." Sarah's blood ran cold. Drugs at an elementary school meant children were potentially at risk, the worst kind of case for any officer, but especially devastating for someone who'd chosen K-9 work, partly because of her love for protecting kids. "We're on our way, Chief." The drive to Millbrook Elementary took 12 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Rex sensed Sarah's tension and placed his massive head on the center console between their seats, a gesture of comfort he'd developed over their years together. Sarah reached over to stroke his graying muzzle, another change she'd been trying to ignore. "When did you start getting gray whiskers, old man?" she murmured. Principal Henderson met them at the school entrance, her usually calm demeanor clearly shaken. "Officer Martinez, thank goodness you're here. We've evacuated all the children to the gymnasium as a precaution. The possible contamination is in the playground area behind the building." Sarah surveyed the scene methodically. The playground sat adjacent to a small wooded area that backed up to Millbrook's notorious Riverside Avenue, a street known for its drug activity. Someone could easily have thrown contraband over the fence to dispose of evidence. "Rex, search," Sarah commanded, using their standard narcotics detection protocol. Rex began his methodical search pattern, nose working systematically across the playground equipment. Sarah watched him carefully, noting that his usual energetic searching had evolved into something more deliberate and thorough. Age was changing his approach, but not his effectiveness. Near the swing set, Rex suddenly alerted, sitting rigidly and staring at a specific spot with laser focus. Sarah marked the location and continued the search. Over the next 40 minutes, Rex identified 7 different areas of concern, creating a pattern that told a troubling story. Someone definitely used this playground as a drug transaction site, Sarah reported to Principal Henderson and the responding detectives. Rex found residue in multiple locations, which suggests repeated activity, not just a single incident. Detective Murphy, once Rex's biggest skeptic, but now one of his strongest supporters, examined the search results. This pattern suggests they were using the playground after hours, probably late at night when no one would see them. We'll set up surveillance immediately. As they waited for the crime scene unit to collect samples, Sarah noticed Rex lying in the shade, panting more heavily than usual despite the mild October weather. When she approached with his water bowl, he struggled slightly to stand the movement, so subtle that only someone who knew him intimately would notice. "You okay, partner?" Sarah asked quietly, running her hands along his body to check for injuries. Rex licked her face reassuringly, but Sarah felt a knot of worry forming in her stomach. She'd heard the statistics. Police dogs typically worked until age 8 or 9, depending on their health and the demands of their assignments. Rex was only 4, but he'd lived an incredibly active life, working cases that would challenge dogs twice his experience. The crime scene processing took another 3 hours. While they waited, children pressed against the gymnasium windows, waving excitedly at Rex. Sarah walked him over to the building, where his presence seemed to calm both the students and the worried teachers. "Officer Martinez," called out Emma Rodriguez, now 10 years old and a 4th grader. "Is Rex going to catch the bad guys who brought drugs to our school?" "Rex has already done his job, Emma," Sarah replied, smiling at the little girl she and Rex had rescued 2 years earlier. "He found all the evidence the detectives need to solve this case." As if understanding the praise, Rex's tail wagged with some of his old enthusiasm. But Sarah noticed he remained lying down instead of standing alert, as he once would have during public interactions. That evening, Sarah made an appointment with Dr. Patricia Chun, the veterinarian who provided medical care for all the department's canine officers. She didn't mention her concerns to anyone else, not Chief Morrison, not her fellow officers, and certainly not the local reporters who loved to feature stories about Millbrook's famous canine team. Just a routine checkup, she told herself, though her heart knew better. As they drove home through the streets of Millbrook, past the houses where porch lights illuminated American flags and "Support Our Police" signs, Sarah reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. They were local heroes, beloved by the community and respected by their peers. Children drew pictures of them for art class assignments. The elderly residents on their patrol routes saved dog treats specifically for Rex, but success came with its own pressures. Every case now carried the weight of expectations. Every search was another opportunity to either maintain their reputation or watch it crumble. And increasingly, Sarah found herself wondering not if Rex would start showing his age, but when, and what would happen to both of them when that day finally arrived. Rex slept peacefully in the passenger seat as they pulled into Sarah's driveway, his graying muzzle resting on his paws. 4 years of partnership had created a bond deeper than Sarah had ever imagined possible. The thought of that bond being threatened by something as inevitable as aging filled her with a dread she wasn't ready to face. Not yet. They still had work to do, cases to solve, and children to protect. But the first shadows of an uncertain future had begun to fall across their perfect partnership. The morning of March 15th, 2023, started with an ominous email marked "Urgent Mandatory Meeting, All Personnel." Sarah stared at her computer screen in the police station's break room, her coffee growing cold as a pit of dread formed in her stomach. Mandatory meetings were never good news, especially ones called with less than 2 hours' notice. Rex lay at her feet, his graying muzzle resting on his paws as he dozed in the warm morning sunlight streaming through the window. At 6 years old, he developed the veteran cop's ability to catch sleep whenever possible. But Sarah noticed he needed these rest periods more frequently now. Dr. Chun's recent examination had revealed early signs of hip dysplasia manageable. For now, but a ticking clock that hung over their partnership. "Martinez, you see the email?" Officer Collins asked, pouring himself coffee with shaking hands. Budget meeting. That's never good. Sarah nodded grimly. Millbrook had been struggling financially ever since the textile factory closed 18 months ago, taking with it over 400 jobs and a significant portion of the town's tax base. The ripple effects had hit every municipal department, but somehow the police had been spared the worst cuts. Until now. At exactly 10 a.m., every officer in the Millbrook Police Department squeezed into the main conference room. Chief Morrison stood at the front, his usually stern face looking older than Sarah had ever seen it. Beside him sat Mayor Davidson and City Manager Patricia Wells, both wearing the grim expressions of people about to deliver devastating news. "I'll get straight to the point," Chief Morrison began, his voice hoarse. The City Council voted last night on emergency budget measures. Due to the ongoing fiscal crisis, the police department must reduce its operating budget by 40%, effective immediately. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. 40% wasn't trimming, it was amputation. Mayor Davidson took over, reading from a prepared statement with the mechanical tone of someone trying to distance themselves from their own words. The following positions will be eliminated effective April 15th. 5 patrol officer positions, 2 detective positions, and, his voice caught slightly, the entire K-9 program. Sarah felt the world tilt sideways. Her hearing seemed to fade as the mayor continued listing cuts, but all she could focus on was those 4 words. The entire K-9 program. Rex stirred at her feet, sensing her distress even in his sleep. The affected officers will receive standard severance packages and assistance with job placement, the mayor continued. We deeply regret these necessary measures. Chief Morrison took back control of the meeting. I want you all to know this decision was not made lightly. I fought for every position, but the numbers don't lie. Without these cuts, the entire department would face closure within 6 months. Officer Patterson, a 15-year veteran, raised his hand. Chief, what about the K-9 officers? Rex has solved more cases in the last 2 years than most detectives. Solve in their entire careers. Morrison's jaw tightened. Officer Martinez will be among those receiving layoff notices. As for Rex... He paused, clearly struggling with the words. Retired police dogs become a liability issue for the city. Insurance requires that they be auctioned off to private buyers rather than transferred directly to their handlers. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Auctioned off? She managed to whisper. I'm sorry, Martinez. I know how close you and Rex are, but my hands are tied. The auction will be held 30 days from today at the community center. All retired police equipment and vehicles will be sold to help offset the budget deficit. The meeting dissolved into chaos as officers asked about pensions, job references, and transition timelines. Sarah sat frozen in her chair, staring at Rex, who had awakened and was looking up at her with those intelligent brown eyes that seemed to understand everything. After the room cleared, Chief Morrison approached Sarah privately. Martinez, I want you to know that recommending you for layoff was the hardest decision I've ever made as chief. You and Rex are the best team this department has ever had. Then why? Sarah asked, her voice barely steady. Seniority rules. Union contract requires that layoffs follow strict guidelines based on hire date and rank. You're the most junior. Officer affected by the cuts. Morrison's voice softened. If it helps at all, I've already made calls to departments in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Your reputation precedes you. There will be opportunities. What about Rex? Those opportunities won't include him, will they? Morrison looked away. Most departments have their own K-9 programs with established teams. And Rex is 6 years old now, which is considered senior for a working dog. The honest truth is that private security companies will probably bid on him. They pay good money. For trained police dogs. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Private security companies that will work him until he drops, and then discard him when he's no longer useful. I wish I had better news, Martinez. I really do. That evening, Sarah sat on her living room floor with Rex's head in her lap, staring at the official layoff notice that had been hand-delivered to her apartment. 30 days. She had 30 days to figure out how to save the most important relationship of her life. Her phone rang constantly, local reporters wanting statements about the budget cuts, other officers offering sympathy, and her mother calling from Florida with worried questions about her future. Sarah let them all go to voicemail. She researched police dog auctions online, growing more horrified with each article she read. Trained police dogs typically sold for anywhere from $8,000 to $15,000, depending on their age, training, and reputation. Rex, despite his age, would likely command top dollar because of his solve rate and media attention. Sarah's savings account contained exactly $3,200. Her unemployment benefits would barely cover rent. Her pension account, which she wasn't eligible to access for another 24 years, held $47,000, her entire retirement fund built over 6 years of police work. It's impossible, Rex, she whispered, scratching behind his ears. Even if the whole community helps, we can't compete with security companies that see you as a business investment. Rex licked her hand, the same gesture of comfort he'd offered thousands of times during their partnership. That simple act of unconditional love broke something inside Sarah, and she began to cry for the first time since she was a child. Outside, the city of Millbrook went about its evening routine, unaware that one of its most beloved partnerships was about to be destroyed by spreadsheets and budget projections. In exactly 30 days, Sarah would have to watch strangers bid on her best friend while she sat powerless to stop it. The countdown had begun, and Sarah had no idea how to stop the clock. Word spread through Millbrook like wildfire in a dry forest. By Wednesday morning, 3 days after the devastating budget announcement, Sarah's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Local business owners, teachers, students, elderly residents people she'd never even met were calling to offer support for what had quickly become known around town as Operation Save Rex. The movement started in the most unlikely place, Mrs. Chun's corner coffee shop, where retired factory workers gathered each morning to solve the world's problems over black coffee and day-old donuts. Tommy Hendricks, who'd worked 43 years at the textile plant before it closed, slammed his coffee cup down so hard it cracked. "This is bullshit," he declared, his weathered face flushed with indignation. "That dog and that girl have done more for this town than half the politicians combined. And now they're going to sell him off like a piece of equipment?" Mrs. Chun, a tiny woman with iron determination, nodded vigorously. "Rex found my grandson when he got lost in the woods 2 summers ago. If it wasn't for him and Officer Martinez, little Danny might have ... double quotes. She couldn't finish the sentence. "So what do we do about it?" asked Martha Williams, whose purse had been recovered by Rex after a parking lot mugging 6 months earlier. "We raise money," Tommy said simply. How much could a dog cost? The question launched a frantic research effort. By noon, the grim reality had settled over the coffee shop like a heavy blanket. Trained police dogs sold for serious money, far more than a small town could realistically raise in 30 days. But the seed of rebellion had been planted. Sarah knew nothing about the coffee shop revolution until Thursday evening when Mrs. Chun appeared at her front door, carrying a shoebox and wearing a determined expression that reminded Sarah of Rex. When he'd caught a scent, "Officer Martinez," Mrs. Chun said without preamble, "the people of Millbrook would like to help you save Rex." Sarah opened the shoebox to find hundreds of crumpled bills, ones, fives, tens, and twenties, along with a handwritten note. From everyone who loves you and Rex, count. $2,847. Mrs. Chun. I can't accept this, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. This is incredibly generous, but it's not nearly enough. Rex could sell for $10,000 or $15,000. It's a start, Mrs. Chun replied firmly. And there's more coming. The elementary school is organizing a penny drive. The high school baseball team is holding a car wash this weekend. Even the Methodist Church is taking up a special collection after Sunday service. Over the next week, the grassroots campaign took on a life of its own. Sarah found herself simultaneously touched and heartbroken as the community she'd served rallied around her. Children brought mason jars full of coins to the police station. Local businesses posted donation boxes next to their cash registers. The Millbrook Gazette ran a front-page story titled, "Community Fights to Keep Beloved Canine Teen Together." But even as the donations poured in, Sarah's private research painted an increasingly bleak picture. Professional dog trainers from Pittsburgh had already expressed interest in Rex. A private security company in Philadelphia had called Chief Morrison directly, inquiring about bidding procedures. Most devastating of all, Sarah discovered that wealthy collectors sometimes paid premium prices for famous police dogs as exotic pets or status symbols. The break came on a Tuesday evening when Sarah was researching online auction records at the public library. Rex lay beside her chair, his graying muzzle resting on her foot as she scrolled through pages of sales data that made her stomach churn with each entry. "Officer Martinez?" A quiet voice interrupted her research. Sarah looked up to see Detective Murphy standing beside her table, his usually stern expression soft with something that looked like sympathy. "Detective, what can I do for you?" Murphy pulled out a chair and sat down heavily. "I heard about the fundraising efforts. How much has the community raised so far?" "About $6,000 as of yesterday," Sarah replied. "It's incredibly generous. Double quotes, but it's not enough." Murphy finished the sentence she couldn't bear to say. "I know. I've been doing my own research." He paused, seeming to wrestle with his words. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. When you and Rex first started, I thought you were just a rookie with a problematic dog. I was wrong. Dead wrong." Sarah was surprised by the admission. Murphy had been professional, but distant throughout her career, neither supportive nor openly critical. "That night Rex found Emma Rodriguez," Murphy continued. "I realized I was watching something special. Since then, I've seen you two solve cases that would have stumped veteran detectives. You've made all of us better cops just by showing us what real partnership looks like." "Thank you, Detective. That means more than you know." Murphy leaned forward. "Sarah, I need to tell you something that might sound crazy. My wife and I have been talking, and we want to help with the auction fund. But more than that, I've been making some calls to contacts in other departments. There might be opportunities for you and Rex together, but they'd require you to relocate." Sarah's heart jumped. What kind of opportunities? "The Pennsylvania State Police has a K-9 training division. They're always looking for experienced handlers to work with new teams. The pay is good, and they specifically want handlers who understand the emotional bond between officers and their dogs." Murphy pulled out a business card. "This is Captain Rodriguez with their K-9 unit. He's expecting your call." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, but it died quickly as reality reasserted itself. "Detective, even if there's a job opportunity, I still have to win the auction first, and I still don't have enough money." Murphy was quiet for a long moment, watching Rex sleep peacefully beside Sarah's chair. "There might be another way," he said finally. But it would require you to make a sacrifice that most people would consider insane. What do you mean? Your pension fund, Sarah. You've got about $47,000 in there, right? I know because I looked at the same option when my son needed surgery a few years back. Sarah's blood went cold. My pension? Detective, that's my entire retirement. Everything I've saved for the last 6 years. I know. And like I said, most people would think it's crazy to risk your entire financial future for a dog. Murphy's voice grew gentle. But I've watched you and Rex together for 4 years. I've seen the way you look at each other, the way you work. Together. That's not just a partnership, that's family. That night, Sarah sat on her living room floor with Rex's head in her lap, staring at the computer screen, showing her pension account balance. $47,342.18. Her entire financial future, accumulated through years of careful saving and modest living. It's crazy, Rex, she whispered to her sleeping partner. Completely insane. If I bid my pension and lose, I'll have nothing. No job, no savings, no future. Rex stirred slightly, his tail thumping once against the hardwood floor as if he could hear her thoughts. But if I don't try, I'll lose you anyway, Sarah continued, her voice breaking. And what's the point of a secure future if you're not part of it? She closed the laptop and made her decision. Tomorrow, she would call Captain Rodriguez about the job opportunity. Tonight, she would prepare to risk everything for the one thing that mattered most. In 23 days, she would either save her best friend or destroy her own future. There was no middle ground, no safety net, no guarantee of success. But for Rex, she was willing to risk it all. May 15th dawned gray and overcast, as if the Pennsylvania sky itself was mourning what was about to unfold at the Millbrook Community Center. Sarah hadn't slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw numbers $47,342.18 in her pension account versus the $15,000, $20,000 that professional bidders might offer for a dog of Rex's caliber and reputation. She sat in her kitchen at 5:30 a.m., mechanically eating cereal she couldn't taste while Rex lay beside her chair, sensing her anxiety like the emotional barometer he'd always been. His graying muzzle rested on her foot, a gesture of comfort that had sustained her through countless difficult moments over their 6-year partnership. Today's the day, partner, she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. One way or another, everything changes today. The phone had been ringing since dawn, reporters from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia wanting statements, community members offering last-minute support, and Detective Murphy calling twice to make sure she was ready. The final community fundraising total had reached $8,200, an incredible achievement for a small town, but still nowhere near what would be needed. Sarah's laptop sat open on the kitchen table, showing her online banking page. Yesterday, she had initiated the paperwork to liquidate her entire pension fund, despite the penalties and tax implications that would cost her nearly $7,000 in fees. The money wouldn't be available for 3 business days, but she'd obtained a cashier's check guarantee from her bank, a promise that she could bid up to her entire life savings if necessary. At 8 a.m., she loaded Rex into the patrol car for what might be their final ride together as partners. The drive to the community center took 12 minutes, but Sarah stretched it to 20, taking the long route through neighborhoods where they'd worked cases together. Past the elementary school where Rex had found drug residue. Past the park where they'd rescued Emma Rodriguez. Past Mrs. Chun's coffee shop where a hand-painted sign in the window, "We love Rex." The Millbrook Community Center parking lot was already packed when they arrived. Sarah counted at least 40 vehicles, including several expensive SUVs, with out-of-state license plates that made her stomach clench with dread. Professional dog buyers, security company representatives, and wealthy collectors had traveled hundreds of miles for this auction. Inside the community center, folding chairs had been arranged in rows, facing a small stage where auctioneer Frank Morrison, no relation to Chief Morrison, was setting up his equipment. Sarah recognized many faces in the crowd. Mrs. Chon sat in the front row with Tommy Hendricks and half the coffee shop regulars. Emma Rodriguez, now 12 years old, sat with her parents, clutching a homemade poster that read, "Save Rex," in glittery pink letters. But the faces that worried Sarah were the ones she didn't recognize. Men in expensive suits consulting tablets and smartphones, a woman with perfectly styled hair taking notes in a leather portfolio, and two representatives from Titan Security Solutions, whose company logo Sarah recognized from her research as one of the largest private security firms on the East Coast. Officer Martinez? A young man with a press badge approached. Jim Stevens from Channel 11 News. Would you be willing to do a quick interview about today's auction? No comment, Sarah replied automatically, then caught herself. These people deserved to know what was happening. Actually, yes. I want people to understand what we're losing today. The impromptu interview drew a crowd. Sarah found herself speaking not just to the reporter, but to the entire room of potential bidders and community supporters. Rex isn't just a police dog, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. He's a partner who has saved lives, protected children, and served this community with complete dedication for 6 years. He deserves better than being sold off like equipment to whoever has the most money. What's your plan for today's auction? The reporter asked. Sarah took a deep breath. I plan to fight for him. Rex and I belong together, and I'll do whatever it takes to make sure he comes home with me tonight. From across the room, she noticed the Titan Security representatives, exchanging glances and making notes. They'd heard her challenge, and she could see them calculating their response. At exactly 10 a.m., Frank Morrison called the auction to order. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Millbrook Police Department Surplus Auction. We'll begin with vehicles and equipment, followed by our special items including retired K9 Rex. The first hour crawled by as patrol cars, radios, and office furniture were sold to various bidders. Sarah sat in the back row, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Rex had been temporarily housed in a side room to reduce his stress, but Sarah could hear his occasional whining as he tried to understand why he was separated from her. And now, Frank Morrison announced, we come to Lot 47, Rex, retired police K9, German Shepherd, 6 years old, trained in narcotics detection, tracking, and apprehension. This animal has an exemplary service record with numerous successful cases. 2 handlers led Rex onto the small stage, and Sarah's heart nearly broke. He immediately began searching the crowd for her, his intelligent eyes scanning faces until he found her in the back row. His tail wagged once, a subtle acknowledgement that said everything about their bond. We'll start the bidding at $3,000, Morrison announced. A security company representative immediately raised his hand. $5,000. Another voice from the middle of the room. $6,000. The Titan security woman. $7,500. The bidding climbed steadily, professionally, without emotion. These weren't people bidding on a beloved family member. They were investors calculating the return on a business asset. $8,000, called the original security representative. Sarah's hand trembled as she raised it for the first time. $8,200. It was every penny the community had raised, and everyone in the room knew it. The Titan security woman smiled coldly and raised her hand. $10,000. A murmur went through the crowd. The professional bidders were now in territory where the community couldn't compete. Sarah felt tears building in her eyes as the reality of losing Rex became unavoidable. $10,000 going once, Morrison called. "Do I hear $10,500? Sarah stood up on shaking legs. Every eye in the room turned toward her, and she could feel the weight of their expectations, their hope, and their love for the partnership that had meant so much to this small town. The moment of truth had arrived. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd saved, everything she'd dreamed of for her future, came down to the next words out of her mouth. Rex looked directly at her from the stage, his brown eyes full of trust and love, waiting to see if his partner would save him one more time. Time seemed suspended in that moment as Sarah stood in the back of the Millbrook Community Center. Every face turned toward her, waiting to see if she would concede defeat or make one last desperate attempt. The Titan security representative sat confidently in her chair, tablet ready to increase her bid if necessary. She'd clearly calculated that the small-town cop had reached her financial limit. $10,000 going once, auctioneer Frank Morrison repeated, his gavel hovering in the V. Air, going twice ... Sarah felt her legs trembling beneath her. Rex's eyes never left her face, and in that intelligent gaze, she saw 6 years of shared experiences flooding back. Their first successful case, late nights on patrol when Rex had been her only companion, the moment he'd saved her life during a drug bust gone wrong, countless training sessions where his patient trust had made her a better officer. The pension fund decision had been theoretical until this moment. Now, faced with the reality of bidding her entire retirement, Sarah felt a wave of terror wash over her. $47,000 wasn't just money, it was security, stability, her future as an older woman who might someday be unable to work. Going 3 times, Morrison began. "Wait," Sarah's voice cracked like a whip across the silent room. She took a deep breath, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. When she spoke again, her voice carried a strength that surprised even her. "I bid $47,000. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Then the whispers began a ripple of shock that spread through the crowd like wildfire. Did she say 47,000? That's impossible. She doesn't have that kind of money. Where would a laid-off cop get? Frank Morrison's voice cut through the murmurs. Mom, I need to verify that you can cover a bid of that magnitude. Sarah's hands shook as she reached into her purse and pulled out the bank documents she'd hoped she wouldn't need. Her voice carried across the silent room with startling clarity. That's my entire pension fund, every penny I've saved over 6 years as a police officer. Every dollar of my retirement, my security, my future. Her voice cracked with emotion, but remained steady. Rex isn't just a dog to me. He's my partner, my family, and my best friend. He's worth everything I have. The community center erupted. Emma Rodriguez burst into tears. Mrs. Chun gasped audibly and grabbed Tommy Hendrix's arm. Chief Morrison, sitting in the middle section, dropped his head into his hands. Even some of the professional bidders looked stunned by the magnitude of Sarah's sacrifice. But it was Rex's reaction that broke Sarah's heart. From the stage, he began whining softly, somehow understanding that something momentous was happening, his tail wagging tentatively as if asking, "Are you really going to save me?" The Titan security representative stared at her tablet, clearly, calculating whether her company's budget could justify going higher. She looked up at Sarah with what might have been respect, then slowly shook her head and closed her tablet. "No further bids from Titan security," she announced quietly. The other professional bidders followed suit. How could they justify outbidding someone who had literally wagered their entire future on love? Frank Morrison looked around the room. "Do I hear any other bids?" The current bid stands at $47,000. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 seconds. Finally, Morrison raised his gavel. "Going once at $47,000. Sarah's vision began to blur with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. Going twice at $47,000? Rex's tail wagged faster, as if he could sense victory approaching. Sold! Morrison's gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed through the room like a gunshot. Lot 47, retired Canine Rex, sold to Officer Sarah Martinez for $47,000. The community center exploded into chaos. People leaped to their feet, cheering and crying simultaneously. Emma Rodriguez broke free from her parents and ran toward the stage. Mrs. Chun was sobbing openly, while Tommy Hendricks pumped his fist in the air shouting, "That's how you do it." But Sarah only had eyes for Rex. The handlers released him from the stage, and he bounded through the crowd with surprising agility for a 6-year-old dog, weaving between chairs and people until he reached her. She dropped to her knees as he crashed into her arms, both of them tumbling to the floor in a tangle of arms, paws, and pure joy. "We did it, boy," Sarah whispered into his fur as he covered her face with kisses. "We're staying together." The crowd pressed around them, but Sarah was only dimly aware of the congratulations and camera flashes. Detective Murphy appeared beside her, his tough guy facade completely cracked as he wiped away tears. "Sarah, that was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed," he said, his voice hoarse. "You just gave up your entire financial future for him." Sarah looked up from where she knelt on the floor with Rex, her face streaked with tears, but radiant with joy. "My financial future doesn't mean anything without him in it. He's saved my life more times than I can count. It was my turn to save his." The Channel 11 reporter was filming everything, his cameraman capturing the raw emotion of the moment. "Officer Martinez, do you have any regrets about spending your entire retirement on Rex?" Sarah stood up slowly, Rex pressed against her side, his head under her hand where it belonged. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had become her family over 6 years of service. The children Rex had helped find, the elderly residents he'd comforted, the fellow officers who had become believers in the power of their partnership. "Regrets?" Sarah repeated, scratching Rex's ears as his tail wagged against her leg. "The only thing I would regret is not fighting hard enough for the things that matter most." From across the room, Chief Morrison approached, his own eyes wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. "Martinez, that was either the most foolish or the most beautiful thing I've ever seen an officer do." Sarah smiled through her tears. "Maybe it was both, Chief, but Rex is worth it. He's worth everything." As the crowd began to disperse, and the reality of what she'd done began to sink in, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and joy that left her lightheaded. She was unemployed, essentially broke, and had just spent her entire retirement fund on a 6-year-old dog. She had never been happier in her entire life. Rex looked up at her with those intelligent brown eyes that had guided her through 6 years of police work, and Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Love wasn't supposed to make financial sense. Love was supposed to be worth everything you had to give. And she had given everything. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood in the crisp November morning air outside the Pennsylvania State Police Canine Training Academy, watching Rex demonstrate proper tracking techniques to a group of rookie handlers and their eager young dogs. At 6.5 years old, Rex had officially retired from active duty, but his new role as a training mentor suited him perfectly. Notice how Rex maintains his focus despite distractions. Sarah called out to the trainees as Rex methodically worked a scent trail that wound through the academy's obstacle course. He's not just following his nose, he's thinking through each decision, evaluating the information his senses are giving him. Officer David Chun, Mrs. Chun's nephew, who had joined the state police partly because of Rex's inspiration, raised his hand. "Sergeant Martinez, how do you get a dog to think independently while still following commands?" Sarah smiled at the title. Her promotion to training sergeant had come just 2 months after she joined the State Police K-9 division, a recognition of both her expertise and the incredible story that had brought her there. The auction footage had gone viral, generating over 15 million views and making Sarah and Rex international symbols of loyalty and sacrifice. Trust, Sarah answered simply. Rex learned to think independently because I trusted his instincts and he trusted my judgment. It's a partnership, not a dictatorship. As the morning training session concluded, Sarah walked Rex back to their shared office, a perk of her position that she'd specifically negotiated. Rex settled onto his custom orthopedic bed, a gift from the State Police Fund that had been established in his honor. His hip dysplasia was manageable with medication and careful exercise, allowing him to enjoy his golden years with dignity. Sergeant Martinez? Captain Rodriguez appeared in her doorway, holding a thick manila envelope. I have some news that might interest you. Sarah looked up from the training reports she was reviewing. Captain Rodriguez had become not just her supervisor but a genuine friend, someone who understood the unique bond between handlers and their canine partners. What kind of news, Captain? Remember that documentary crew that filmed the training session last month? Well, the story about you and Rex has caught the attention of some very important people. He handed her the envelope. Inside you'll find a book deal offer from a major publisher, a movie option from a Hollywood studio, and most importantly, a proposal to establish the Sarah and Rex Foundation. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the envelope. The numbers were staggering enough. Money to not only restore her retirement fund, but to secure her financial future for life. But it was the foundation proposal that made her heart race. A foundation? She asked, scanning the legal documents. Dedicated to helping police officers adopt their retired canine partners, Rodriguez explained. The initial funding would come from the book and movie deals, but the goal is to create a permanent endowment that ensures no officer ever faces the choice you had to make. Rex lifted his graying head from his bed, as if sensing the importance of the conversation. Sarah reached down to scratch his ears, marveling at how their story had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. There's more, Rodriguez continued, clearly enjoying her reaction. The governor wants to meet with you next week. There's talk of changing state law to give canine handlers the first right of adoption for their retiring partners, with state assistance if needed. Sarah felt tears building in her eyes. You mean other officers won't have to go through what we did? That's the idea? Your sacrifice has started a movement, Sarah. Police departments across the country are reviewing their policies on retired K9S. The Fraternal Order of Police has endorsed the foundation proposal unanimously. That evening, Sarah drove Rex to their favorite spot, a hill overlooking Millbrook, where they used to end their patrol shifts. The small town spread out below them, its lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Even though Sarah now lived an hour away, she still considered Millbrook home. Look what you've done, old man, she said, settling beside Rex on the blanket she'd brought. Our story is going to help K9 teams all across the country. Rex's tail thumped contentedly against the ground. At his age, he preferred peaceful moments like this to the excitement of active duty, though he still perked up whenever he heard a police siren. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chun. Saw you on the news again. Coffee shop is framed full of newspaper clippings about you and Rex. Come visit soon. Another text followed immediately from Emma Rodriguez, now 13 and captain of her middle school soccer team. Sergeant Martinez. My coach says your story is what leadership looks like. Can Rex come to our team dinner next month? As the messages continued to arrive, former colleagues sharing updates, training academy students asking questions, reporters requesting interviews, Sarah marveled at how their auction day sacrifice had created ripples that continued to spread. You know what the best part is, Rex? Sarah said, pulling him closer as the evening air grew cool. We're not just helping other K9 teams stay together. We're showing people that love is worth everything, even when it seems impossible. The book deal would be titled Worth Everything, a love story between a cop and her dog. The movie was already in pre-production, with the casting director insisting on using actual police dogs rather than trained actors. But the foundation was Sarah's real pride already. They'd helped 12 officers across 6 states adopt their retiring K9 partners. As they sat watching the stars appear over Millbrook, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them. Here, 6 months ago, she'd been an unemployed officer facing the loss of her best friend. Tonight, she was a respected trainer, a published author-to-be, and the founder of an organization that would protect K9 partnerships for generations. The funny thing is, Sarah told Rex as they prepared to head home, I thought I was saving you that day at the auction. But you were saving me right back, weren't you? Rex licked her hand, the same gesture of comfort and affection he'd offered thousands of times over their 7-year partnership. Some things never changed, and Sarah was grateful for that constancy in a life that had been transformed by one moment of absolute courage. Driving home through the Pennsylvania countryside, Sarah glanced in her rearview mirror at Rex sleeping peacefully in the back seat. Their story had a happy ending, but more importantly, it had created the possibility of happy endings for countless other K9 teams facing similar challenges. Sometimes the most important victories weren't the ones you won for yourself, or the ones you won for everyone who came after. And as Rex's gentle snoring filled the car, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that every penny of her pension fund had been worth it. Their love story had become a legacy, and the best chapter was still being written.